Her mind flashed back to the stories of Obinna's previous wives. Was this where they had met their fate? Was this where Obinna had brought them after their marriages had soared? A sense of dread washed over her as she heard a sound behind her, a soft scrappling noise like the shuffles of feet on stones. She turned quickly, her breath catching in her throat, but there was no one there. The shadows seemed to dance on the walls, mocking her, daring her to stay. Ezinne backed out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to leave, to get out of the mansion before it was too late. But as she turned to go, she froze in shock. Obinna was there, standing at the top of the basement stairs. Going somewhere, my dear? Ezinne grew up in a small, poor Igbo village, where life was a constant struggle. The memories of her mother, enduring endless abuse from her stepfather, haunted her like a persistent ghost. It was this image that fueled her determination to succeed, to rise above the ashes of her past and provide a better life for herself and her family. From a young age, Ezinne knew that she was different. Her beauty and intelligence was undeniable. It became both a blessing and a curse. While it opened doors, it also invited unwanted attention. Even though she had graduated top of her class from the university, men saw her not for her sharp mind or her ambitious spirit, but for the curves of her body, the way her smile lit up a room. They wanted her, but on their own terms. After completing her NYSC, Ezinne moved to Lagos City. There she got a small one-room face-me-I-face-you apartment around Agege in Lagos mainland and joined the endless stream of job seekers. There she faced the harsh reality that the world didn't care about her top grades or her intelligence. She was nothing more than a pretty face in a sea of other pretty faces, and the job offer she hoped for never came. Instead, she received luck propositions, offers for jobs that require a different set of qualifications, one she wasn't willing to give. Frustrated and dejected after another fruitless day of job hunting, Ezinne returned home, dropping her bag on the floor carelessly and throwing herself onto the bed. She sighed tiredly. Just then her phone rang, and the moment she heard her sister's trembling voice, she knew something was wrong. "Auntie, Mama is sick. Neighbors just rush her go hospital." "What do you mean Mama is sick? What about Papa?" Ezinne inquired, fearing the worst. "We never see Papa since. The last time when he come house, it if Mama money run comot." Ezinne's sister explained as she continued to sob. Panic seized Ezinne's heart. Her mother, the one person who had sacrificed everything for her, was now lying critically ill in the hospital. There was no money for treatment. The next morning, Ezinne was in a bus headed to her village, desperate to seek help from family members and friends, but none was forthcoming. Everyone had their own struggles, and no one was willing to extend a hand. Her mother's condition deteriorated rapidly, and within days she was gone. The grief that followed was unbearable. Ezinne felt the weight of her failure crushing down on her, the guilt of not being able to save her mother gunning at her soul. But in her darkest moment, she made a vow. She would go back to Lagos and make something of herself, no matter the cost. It didn't take long for Lagos to remind Ezinne that success was a game with rules she wasn't ready to break yet. When she received an employment letter from Safe Place Real Estate Company, it felt like her luck was finally turning around. As a marketer, she was eager to prove herself, but the reality of the job was harsh. The competition was fierce, and selling luxury homes to Lagos elites was no small task. 2 months passed, and Ezinne hadn't sold a single property. The pressure was mounting, and the calls from her siblings demanding money didn't help. She was on the brink of despair when she met another realtor, Izzy, a flashy young woman who seemed to have it all: wealth, status, and the admiration of everyone around her. Izzy was everything Ezinne aspired to be. She owned an apartment in Lagos Island, Lekki Phase 1, and drove a Range Rover Vela. Ezinne quickly latched onto her as a mentor. Izzy didn't sugarcoat the reality of their world. "Ezinne, this business isn't just about showing houses, so it's about showing yourself too. These men want more than a good deal. They want to feel like they're getting something special in return. If you want to succeed, you have to play the game of scratch my back, I scratch your back, and you watch the money roll in." Ezinne was hesitant at first. She had always prided herself on her integrity, but with each passing day, The weight of her responsibilities grew heavier. Izzy's words echoed in her mind, and she began to see the truth in them. In a city like Lagos, morals were a luxury she couldn't afford. The transformation was swift. Izzy moved in with Ezinne, who took her under her wing and showed her the ropes. She upgraded her wardrobe and taught her how to appeal to her clients' desires and, most importantly, how to close deals that benefited both parties. Ezinne became a different person. She was no longer the naive girl from the village. She was now a woman who knew how to use her beauty and charm to get what she wanted. Within weeks, she was awarded Best Staff of the Month, having brought in the largest revenue for her department. Her colleagues were shocked at her sudden rise, whispering about how she had managed to do what they couldn't. Ezinne's success continued to soar. She became the star of Safe Place Real Estate Company, the go-to agent for high-profile clients. She brought a Benz worth millions of naira and sent money home regularly, finally able to provide for her siblings. One evening, she received a call from an unknown number. "Hello, Ezinne. I have heard a lot about you." The man said, his tone smooth and commanding. "I have a client who is interested in buying several properties in Pinnock Beach Estate and Ikoyi, and he has specifically requested for you. Meet him tomorrow at Radisson Blu Hotel. He will be waiting in the presidential suite." Ezinne's heart raced with excitement. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of client that could catapult her career to new heights. She didn't question how the man knew her or why he had chosen her specifically. All that mattered was the deal, the money and the prestige that came with it. The next evening, Ezinne dressed up in her finest red dress, the one that hugged her curve perfectly and eluded confidence. She sprayed on her most expensive perfume, the Tom Ford's Lost Sherry, that radiated a sweet, juicy scent, and headed to the hotel. When she arrived at the suite, she was greeted by Obinna, a man who took her breath away. He was tall with a broad chest and shoulders, his physique eluding power. His beard was meticulously groomed, and his eyes held a magnetism that drew her in. Ezinne was captivated by him, her usual confidence flattering in his presence. Obinna wasn't like her other clients. He was charming, intelligent, and genuinely interested in her thoughts. They spent hours talking, and by the end of the night, Ezinne was hooked. Over the following days, Obinna proved himself to be a perfect gentleman. He would send her a bouquet of flowers, luxury designer bags and shoes, and even cash gifts. Every day with him, a new level of spoiling was opened, and he treated her like a queen. She had never met a man like him, and when he proposed marriage, just weeks later, she didn't hesitate to say yes. When Ezinne got back to the Lekki apartment, she shared with Izzy. The music was booming from the brand new GLE 450 Obinna had given her. As a thank you for agreeing to be his wife, she waved new car keys around, making sure to show off the Van Cleef and her Pearl's diamond cut eternity ring on her fingers, knowing Izzy would notice as she hurried out to greet her. No way. Izzy looked around the building suspiciously before turning to look at Ezinne, seeking confirmation. He proposed with a Van Cleef. "Do you know how much this ring cost? And the car?" Izzy said, looking at Ezinne, her eyes questioning her silently. "But babe, don't you think it's too early? It's been just 3 weeks of knowing this man, and he has already proposed." "Well, it takes a day to get to know someone, Izzy. Relax, Obinna really is a nice guy." "Well, Sha, you're a smart babe. I am sure you know what you're doing. But this car mad, Sha," Izzy said, as they both laughed knowingly. Soon the wedding day came, and it was a grand affair. The kind that made headlines, and the creme de la cremes of the Lagos society attended, and this left the city buzzing for weeks. Ezinne felt like she was living a dream, but deep down, there was a nagging doubt, a voice that warned her of the stories she had heard about Obinna's previous wives. Several days later, Ezinne realized that marriage to Obinna was nothing like she had imagined. The gentle, caring man she had fallen in love with began to change almost immediately after the wedding. He became distant, setting rules on where she should and should not go. He would lock himself in a specific room for days and would not speak or see anyone. Sometimes he leaves the house for days without any explanation. He received strange packages from time to time and received private calls very often. When he spent time with her, his behavior was erratic, swinging between intense affection and cold indifference. But the worst part was the house itself. The mansion, which had once seemed like a symbol of her success, now felt oppressive, filled with a malevolent energy. At night, Ezinne would hear strange noises coming from the back of the house, muffled voices, the sound of footsteps where no one was supposed to be. She began having nightmares, vivid and terrifying dreams in which she was buried alive, suffocating as the earth closed in around her. The first time it happened, she woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. Obinna was by her side, his expression unreadable, as he tried to calm her down, but instead of comforting her, his presence only intensified her fear. There was something in his eyes that made her blood run cold, a darkness that she had not noticed before. As the days went on, the nightmares became more frequent and Ezinne found herself growing increasingly paranoid. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that there was something sinister lurking just out of sight. The once luxurious mansion now felt like a trap, and every shadow seemed to conceal a hidden threat. Obinna's behavior only grew more erratic. He would disappear for days at a time, and when he returned, he would act as if nothing was amiss. Ezinne tried to confront him, to ask him where he was always going to, and why he was acting the way he was, but he would always deflect her questions, his answers vague and unconvincing. Then came the day when Ezinne's fears were confirmed. She was cleaning out one of the rooms in the mansion when she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. In a dusty old box hidden at the back of the closet, she found a collection of photographs. They were pictures of women, beautiful women just like her, all dressed in white wedding gowns. Each one smiled brightly at the camera, but as Ezinne flipped through the photos, she noticed something unsettling. These women weren't just strangers, they were Obinna's previous wives. Her hands trembled as she continued to glance through the photographs, each one more disturbing than the last. In the earlier photos, the women looked happy, radiant even, but as the timelines progressed, their smiles faded. Their eyes, once full of life, grew vacant and hollow. The final picture in the stack was the most horrifying of them all. It showed the woman, her face twisted in a horrifying scream, her hands outstretched as if trying to escape the frame. Ezinne dropped the photos, her heart racing. The story she had heard about Obinna's previous wives suddenly felt all too real. One had supposedly gone mad, another had disappeared without a trace, and the third, Ezinne shuddered at the thought. What had really happened to them? And was she next? She quickly swerved the photographs back into the truck, her mind racing as she rushed into her room, confused and scared at the discovery she had just made. She began to pace across, worriedly, as she put a cross through to Izzy. The phone rang twice, and Izzy picked up. The only Oga's wife I know. This one you're calling me at this time of the night. Don't tell me you're beginning to miss me. Babe, I think I am in trouble. I am so scared. I can't even think straight. I think I made a mistake. Do you think I made a mistake by marrying Obinna? Ezinne quizzed her friend frantically as she continued to pace around the room, looking around fearfully to ensure no one was looking or coming. Ezinne, slow down. What's up? Are you okay? I don't think Obinna is the person he claims to be. Ezinne thought about running away. Immediately she dropped the call with her friend, but she was too scared of returning back to her impoverished life. Since Obinna stopped her from working, immediately they got married. She had no family in Lagos to turn to, except Izzy, her friend. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with the weight of her running thoughts. That night, the nightmares grew even worse. Ezinne found herself trapped in a coffin, the sound of death being shoveled on top of her, pounding in her ears. Desperate, she scratched at the coffin's lid. The darkness swallowed her whole. She jolted awake, screaming, her body soaked in cold sweat. The nightmares were becoming too frequent, robbing Ezinne of sleep, and now strange noises echoed through the house. Sometimes it sounded like women wailing from deep within the basement, a place she had never seen all the time she has been living with Obinna. The sound was unnerving, but on one particular night, Ezinne decided she couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to find out where it was coming from. With trembling hands, she slipped her phone into the pocket of her pajamas, grabbed a flashlight, and cautiously made her way outside, toward the BQ where the eerie cries seemed to be leading. As she opened the door, a cold gush of hair hit her, carrying a foul, nauseating smell she instantly recognized. It was the same stench that lingered at the cemetery the day they buried her mother, one she had tried too hard to forget. Fear tightened around her chest as she stepped inside the dimly lit room, filled with old crates and forgotten belongings. Ezine's eyes scanned the space, unsure of what to expect, until she noticed a rusty old door tucked behind a pile of crates. The door looked out of place in such a grand mansion, and just staring at it sent a shiver down her spine. Swallowing her fears, she moved the crates aside, her heart pounding louder with every second. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she reached for the door and began to open it. The air inside was damp and musty, the smell of decay overwhelming. Ezine stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The room was small and windowless, with a stone floor and walls lined with shelves. On the shelves were various items, old candle jars filled with strange, unidentifiable substances, and several objects that looked like they belonged in a witch doctor's hut. But it was the large stone slab in the center of the room that drew Ezine's attention. It was covered in what looked like dried blood, and beside it laid a set of old rusted chains. Ezine's heart raced as she realized what she was looking at. This wasn't just a room. This was a place of ritual, a place where something dark and sinister had taken place. Her mind flashed back to the stories of Obinna's previous wives. Was this where they had met their fates? Was this where Obinna had brought them after their marriages had soared? A sense of dread brushed over her as she heard a sound behind her, a soft-scrapping noise like the shuffles of feet on stone. She turned quickly, her breath catching in her throat, but there was no one there. The shadows seemed to dance on the walls, mocking her, daring her to stay. Ezine backed out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to leave, to get out of the mansion before it was too late. But as she turned to go, she froze in shock. Obinna was there, standing at the top of the basement stairs. Going somewhere, my dear? Ezine froze, her mind racing for an escape. But Obinna's presence filled the space, blocking her way out. She had never seen him like this before, cold, calculating, with a darkness in his eyes that terrified her. I was just looking around. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Obinna interrupted, his tone sharp. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Didn't mean to uncover my secrets. Didn't mean to snoop where you do not belong. Ezine's blood ran cold. She had no doubt now. Obinna was dangerous, and she was in more trouble than she had ever imagined. Ezine's heart raced as she tried to think of a way out. She knew she couldn't let Obinna see the fear in her eyes. She needed to stay calm, to beat her time until she could make a break for it. I'm sorry, Obinna. I didn't mean to upset you. I was just curious, that's all. Obinna studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, a slow, predatory grin that made her skin crawl. Curiosity can be dangerous, isn't it? He said, his voice dripping with menace. But I'm glad you're here. There's something I've been meaning to show you. Before Ezine could react, she felt a heavy blow on her head and blacked out. Few moments later, Ezine's eyes fluttered open. The air around her was dark, and the atmosphere smelled like death. Raising her head swiftly in an attempt to sit up, she felt a loud tug on her head. Ezine panicked as she began to feel around her environment. The realization dawned on her. She had been buried alive. In a fit of desperation and self-preservation, Ezine began to fight against the suffocation of the coffin and those of the dead clawing at the walls. But it was of no use. The earth was relentless, and soon the pit was getting filled to the brim. Ezine's cry for help were muffled, her breath growing shallow as the death piled up around her. In her darkest moments, almost running out of oxygen, Ezine remembered her phone, which she had slipped into her pocket before being hit. With trembling fingers, she fumbled for the device, dialing Izzy's number. The phone rang once, twice, before Izzy's frantic voice came through the line. Ezine, what's happening? I've been trying to reach you. Help. Help me. Ezine whispered, her voice barely audible. Obinna, He buried me. Izzy's scream pierced the phone, and then the line went dead. Panic surged through Ezinne as she fought to stay conscious. The weight of the earth was overwhelming, and her vision blurred as she fought to keep herself awake. Meanwhile, Izzy had acted swiftly. It was 1 a.m. at night as she drove straight to the nearest police station, panic and worry visible on her face, almost hitting the signboard outside the station, causing the policemen on duty to scatter into the nearby bushes. "Help! Someone help!" She screamed at the top of her voice shaking with urgency. The policemen, who had scattered in different directions, came out of hiding with guns in their hands. "Madam, which one be help? You nearly give person heart attack for here. If not be say na woman you be, I for don't shoot you since." One of the policemen said, putting his gun away. The DPO on duty, hearing the commotion outside the station, also rushed out and upon seeing the panicked lady, approached Izzy calmly. "Madam, please, relax. How can we be of help?" he said, trying to make Izzy relax. "No, please, you have to come with me. My friend, she's in trouble," she said quickly, flashing a picture of Ezinne and her husband she had on her phone. At the sight of Obinna, the policemen began to exchange quick glances at each other and proceeded to mobilize themselves. They were very familiar with Obinna's dubious reputation. In fact, Obinna had been under investigation for some time. But due to the lack of concrete evidence, the police have been unable to put him away. They drove straight to Obinna's mansion with their sirens blazing through the night. They stormed the mansion, breaking down the basement doors and beginning their frantic search for Ezinne. Minutes felt like hours as Ezinne remained trapped in the pit. The darkness was all-consuming, the cold earth pressing down on her. But then she heard it, the faint sound of digging, the scrapping of shovels against death, the shouts of rescuers, the distant hum of voices. The darkness began to recede as the dirt was removed from above her. As the policemen broke through the wooden coffin, hands reached down, pulling her out, their warmth and strength, a stark contrast to the cold, suffocating earth. Ezinne gasped as she was lifted into the light, her lungs burning with the desperate need for air. The paramedics worked quickly, assessing her condition and providing first aid. The police officers, stern and focused, took Obinna into custody. He was handcuffed and led away, his face a mask of cold fury. Ezinne was wheeled out of the mansion, her body trembling from both fear and cold. The full weight of her ordeal hit her. She had survived the nightmarish experience, with the scars, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal. The news of the rescue spread quickly, and soon the stories of Obinna's ritualistic practices, abuse, murder, drug peddling, and the attempt to bury his wife alive was all over Lagos. Ezinne was hailed as a survivor, while people who knew her, but the trauma of her experience would linger long after the headlines faded. Ezinne, having learned her lesson, picked up the pieces of her life, starting her own real estate firm from the money she made from selling most of the expensive gifts Obinna had gotten her during the period they were dating, and the money she had saved. Her experience with Obinna became a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most glamorous lifestyle.